Welcome back. This is John P. Kelleher from Los Monos College, and this is week 11. Week 11. We're going over wildland firefighting. So wildland fire behavior. Wildland fire is different than any other type of fire, structural, vehicle, or rubbish fire. Wildland fire is probably the most dangerous and unpredictable of any other. Why? It's because it can change in an instant, and sometimes you cannot escape it. Examples of that is Steve Ruck from Nevada Fire, and CDF CAL FIRE firefighters in San Luis Obispo. Winds changed. This guy's passed. Sad. What is a wildland fire? Any fire that's located on the interface or a rural area, and its fuel is grass, light brush, timber, or any other natural type of fuel. See that there's some agencies. CAL FIRE, California Fire Department of Forestry, CDF, CAL FIRE. U.S. Forest Service, USFS, United States Forest Service. BLM, Bureau of Land Management. U.S. Forest Service and BLM are both federal. Hotshot crews, I was at the beginning. It doesn't really exist. They exist for different departments in, like I said, rural areas. And then obviously El Cerrito, Richmond, Confire, Oakland, LA, all have wildland areas. So this is part of your job. San Francisco City has wildland areas. So this is part of your job. Every areas has grass or some brush. It's going to be affecting some part of your career. Any fire, let's see, how do they start? How do wildland fires start? Timber or grass are usually start in remote areas. May start by a thunder or lightning storms. People's carelessness, like campfires, cigarettes, catalytic converters. Those things underneath the car. They get hot. The exhaust system, they get red hot. They're parked over some grass. Those will take off. Had that happen when I was in Santa Barbara County. We'll go over, and then of course arson. We'll go over LCS. That's one of the handouts. Again, on your in Canvas, you have 3 handouts. I want you to go over the watch out orders, terminology. I think there's 2 pages on the terminology. And there's all these different standing orders we talk about with wildland. Don't need to know them, have to understand them, and you may be tested on that. The 3 main concerns for wildland fire, and know these: fuel, weather, and topography. Fuel, weather, topography. Those are the 3 big issues when it talks about wildland fire. First one, fuel. Fuel is what burns. The different types of fuels are the light, medium, or heavy fuels. The light consists of grasses, heavy or light. They're 1 to 10 hour fuels. The mediums are brush, Scotch broom, heavy brush. Those are 10 to 100 hour fuels. And then your heavy fuels are your timber, redwoods, heavy wood. Those are 100 to 1,000 hour fuels. So that's your big fuels. The components of the fuels are the fuel moisture, the fuel arrangement, the quantity, and the types. The fuel moisture is the percentage of water within that fuel. Live versus dead being more dangerous because there's no fuel, there's no moisture in them. Those take off. In your guys' generations, what's happening now, and I'm learning from the people who are working today, is because of the drought issues, the last 5-year drought, those fuels are so dead and lack such moisture, those things will take off. They usually kind of burn out a little bit at certain spots. Those are now taking off because the fuel moisture is so low. Annual grasses, stage of grasses. When you have annual grasses, usually what happens, obviously they turn green because of the rain. Then as the spring comes in, they'll turn purple, and then they'll turn brown, and that's dry and ready to light. Age, 100-year fuels. Some areas that you may have are up to 100 years fuels. And what they mean by 100-year fuels is that means they have not been lit or hasn't had a fire up there for over 100 years. So those are ready to go. Fuel arrangement. This is the laddering of fuels, we call it. This is where you need kind of like a kindling. You need kindling to get things going. So you need some kind of light grass, and then it goes into the grass, then it gets into the brush, and the brush gets going, and then it goes into timber. So it goes like a laddering or fuel arrangement. Quantity is how much fuel you have, and the types are grass, brush, i.e. chemise, manzanita, chaparral, all pretty heavy fuels. Those things take off. Timber being a redwood, oak, or pine. Topography, know this about this, again with fuel, weather, topography. Topography is the lay of the land. It's the elevation, it's the canyons, it's the valleys. Topography includes slope, aspect, box canyons, saddles, hogback ridge lines, chimneys, or chutes. I'll go over each one. Aspect. Know the aspect. Aspect is the direction the slope faces. So if you're on a mountain and you're on a hill and it's facing north, it's a north aspect. It's not directed at the face of the hill. It's from where you're on the face of the hill and where it's pointing out. So it's the north aspect, meaning it points to the north. Box canyon is a box canyon where you have one way in and one way out. One way to go in, one way out. Very dangerous. Saddles are like a dip in the ridge line. There's a ridge line going like this. It kind of takes a dip. Then you have hogback ridge line. That's where it's a very very low, the very narrow ridge line on the top. Very scary. And then lastly, your chimneys or chutes. These are basically a rise that are very narrow and steep. That's a chute is where the fire will get down below and it'll go up into a chute and just take off like it's a chimney effect. Very dangerous. You don't not want to be on top of the chute. Not good. You see that on your LCS or your watch out orders. Lay of the land. What we mean by the lay of the land is, there's a map on the handouts in your PowerPoint. We're talking about the north, the south, the west, and the east aspects. On the north aspect, meaning it's facing north, you're going to have a high relative humidity, low winds, higher live fuel moisture. On the south aspect, you're going to have a low fuel moisture, peak lighting, grassy fuels, and what happens by the south aspect means that's where all the lighter, flashy fuels are. Those are the ones that take off quickly because the sun's there most of the day. Okay? And then the west aspect, you have a higher brush, late heating, late runs, transitional winds, and then your east aspect is your early heating, lots of sun during the daytime. So your southeast aspects, those are most dangerous during the daytime. Very brutal. Most, like I said, most you'll have woodlands as you go north in your aspects, and then grass, lighter fuels, brushes on your south aspect, southeast. And then lastly, weather. Weather is the most critical factor in fire behavior and fire spread. Weather involves different parts, i.e. wind, temperature, relative humidity, cloud series, and fronts. Wind, know this. It's the most critical weather factor. It can change the whole fire regardless of the temperature. There are different types of winds: gradient, gravity, and local. Gradient wind is the movement of air in response to barometric pressure. Gravity is the movement of air from a high pressure to a low pressure. High pressure being warm to a low pressure being cold. Local is the local wind is a movement of air from heating and cooling of various fuel types. And then the phone wind, know this one, the phone wind, or we call in Southern California, the Santa Ana wind. We're now having phone winds, which we call now the Diablo wind up here in Northern California. Let's say those are dry, strong winds that come from a higher dry area, okay, into a low pressure area. So they begin like in very dry areas, i.e. like the desert, and they come into more cooler air, hence into the coast, like in LA, and that's that phone wind. Extremely dangerous, Santa Ana winds. Now in California, we're getting those now. And those are extremely dangerous. And those hot, dry winds, so much when you're in Southern California, fight fires down there, it's almost like a blow dryer. That's how hot they are. So very, very brutal, very dangerous. Temperature, the higher the better for fires. So if you have higher temperature, better for fires. They talk about relative humidity. That's basically the percentage of moisture in the air. That means 30%. So it means you'll see on a barometric pressure, you'll look at, they'll say the relative humidity, or you listen to the news, they talk about the RH, humidity in the air. Excuse me. That's a percentage of moisture in the air. So if you have 30% or lower, that's favorable for fires. When you get anything under 15%, that's critical when it comes to fires. It means when we talk that dry wind, hot dry winds like in Arizona or Palm Springs, those things, that's because the relative humidity is so low. It's such dry, the air is so dry. Rule of thumb, for every 20 degrees increase of temperature, the relative humidity drops 50%. So be aware of that. Cloud series, these are the formation of clouds. You have vertical clouds, means unstable weather pattern. Horizontal clouds are more stable, okay? Cloud identifiers are cirrus, meaning high clouds. Alto or middle, stratus or low, and lenticular are straight up high. The one I learned in the Wildland days is when we had that thunderstorm, when we have the lenticular, cumulonimbus, lenticular cloud formations. It's almost like a V pattern. Those are extremely dangerous. Those are ready to lightning strikes, extreme weather on the fronts. And that's in those wildland areas. Very dangerous. Then we talk about fronts. Fronts are the beginning or the end of weather patterns. This is where fronts, whether it be cold front or warm front, how they meet or where they go. The wildland fire, the cold fronts are where cold air replaces the warm air. The warm air is where the warm air replaces the cold air. You got to know about weather when you go into wildland. Got to know what's going on with the weather at all times. The weather, the fuel RH, the temperature, the winds. You got to know all that. You got to stay very clear on that and up to date. Extremely critical when it comes to wildland fire. Wildland fire behavior and its parts. And again, there's a picture on this. You'll show it in your slides. We're going to go over flank, island, spot fire, green, black, and finger. I'll go over that in just a second. Then we have shown the basic flame models. No wind, no slope, slope-driven, wind-driven, slope preheats, fuel convective, all that kind of stuff. Your wildland fire attack methods. You have your direct attack. That means you go directly into the head of the head or flank of the fire. You can use a progressive hose lay, where you basically start one area. You start at an anchor point, and then you just take off. You start at the engine, and you charge the line. Everybody's got hose packs. You go 100 feet, you break it down, clamp the hose line, reconnect, take another 100 feet, advance another 100 feet, and you just keep on going up the hose line. That's what they call progressive hose line. You're starting at an anchor point, and you're just taking off from where it is. Okay? That's what we call direct attack, and that's what you would call a progressive hose line. You need the water, you need the personnel, you need the equipment, and you need positive weather, topography, and fuel to go after it. Indirect attack, that's a situation where heavy and dense fuels, erratic winds, or their steep topography are present. You cannot directly attack it. Therefore, you attack the fire by safely keeping a distance from the firefighters and the fire. Then there's some controversy, and understand the difference here. Backfiring means firing out. Backfiring is used as an indirect attack method, setting a fire from a hot flank and let it join the original fire. So if I'm at a house, if I'm protecting a house here, I'm going to start a backfire, and where the original fire is coming this way, I'm going to let the fires meet, let fire fight fire, literally, and they will join. The convective heat will join together. That's what they call backfire. If you do backfire, you have to have the incident commander's authorization, because that's what happened with Steve Rucker in Nevada and other firefighters passed. Everybody's got to know what's going on in that situation. So backfires are dangerous and must be authorized, and everybody's got to know about backfire. But firing out is where the firefighters go to an area of safety and fire out the area so they can deploy their burnout shelters. This is only when it's a last resort critical situation. So the fires takes a change in wind. Suddenly they don't know where they're at. They're going to go to their safety zone, and they're going to fire out to make everything safe around them. And then they're going to deploy their shelters, and we'll learn about that when we get to the fire academy. And those basically aluminum foil, we call it shake and bakes. You get in this little tent and protects you. Instead of having 1,000, 1,500 degrees, it's going to be inside that tent, probably more like 100, 150, maybe 200 degrees. Much more warm, much more cooler, I guess. So that's how you save your life. Have I been in one? Yes, in training, but not for real. Very dangerous. Okay, so, and again, when you do your burnout shelters and you do your firing out, that's your last resort. That's when it's so dangerous. Okay, now if you go to your slide when it talks about flanks, islands, spot fires, green, black, and all that kind of stuff is, again, this is in your terminologies. Flanks are the sides of the wildland fire, roughly parallel the main direction of fire. Spread, the right and left flanks separate the head of the fire. So if you have your head of fire and your flanks are on the side of it, and that's where it's going. So this is your right flank, your left flank, and that's your head of the fire, and it's going up like this, going up a hill. So you're taking one of those flanks. Islands, there are unburned areas inside the fire perimeter, or we'll call islands, meaning that inside that big fire going on, there'll be an island in there. And these are because they are unburned potential fuels for more fire that must be patrolled for frequently. The spot fire is caused by flying sparks or embers landing outside the main fire. Spot fires present a hazard to personnel and equipment, working on the main fire because they could be trapped between the two fires. Spot fires must be extinguished quickly or they'll form a new head. What we used to do in wildland fires, we used to start the fire, do a backfire, or the fire's coming at us. And so what we'll do is we'll start a lineup and we'll literally face the fire, and we're looking for any spot fires from the fire, meaning any embers flying over us. And if we see a fire, then we go directly to it, and we take our McLeods or whatever it is, and we put that small spot fire out. Those spot fires become big fires, so you have to monitor the spot fire. And then we talk about the green versus the black. Green is the area of unburned fuels. It's not burned. Next to the involved area called the green. While the term refers to the color name of the fuels in the area, the green may not be green at all. It's just basically the unburned area. The green does not indicate a safe area. It's simply the opposite of the burned area, or the black. The black is the opposite of the green. That's the black, or the area in which the fire is consumed, or the black in the fuels. The black is relatively safe area because the fire's already gone through. Very hot and smoky at time environment, but still it's not burning the green. So when we want to escape somewhere, you want to go back to the black. Go to the black. Go to the black. Okay, as we say, you go to the burned areas. Okay, and again, it's about escape route. Critical in this business. You got to have an. And so we talk about in your watch out orders and your 10 safety fire orders, your watch out orders. You got to have an established safety zone. So if something goes bad, the weather changes, you know where to go to deploy your shelters. Run to go to your safety or escape route. Go to your safety zone, and that's when you deploy your shelters or whatever it is. So the fire is going out, and most often at the time it could be in the black. I mean, it's already burned. All right, and again, here's your Fireland, Wildland. These are in your handouts. Your fire Wildland terminology. Okay, and then also is your 10 stand fire orders, your watch outs. Okay, these are all on your canvas and handouts. Study those. Be familiar with those as well. Okay, that concludes week 11, and there'll be this consist after doing week 11 in this lecture, you're going to do quiz 7. Okay, thank you very much. Take care.